If you want to stop chunking the ball, then you're going to need to stick around and watch this video, which will tell you exactly why this problem occurs and give you specific practical drills that you can take to the driving range in order to fix this frustrating problem. So chunking the golf ball, or more specifically hitting the ground before the ball, which is really where that name comes from, is a frustrating shot that many of you will have experienced at some point in your golfing career. The joy of hitting a great drive down the fairway and then the frustration of walking up to your next shot and hitting the sod over the ball cannot be overestimated. It's hugely frustrating when you've done that. So how can you stop chunking the ball? What causes it and what can you do to avoid it? Well, there's two main reasons that you will hit the ground before the ball. Number one is the location of your weight. If you took the weights, as you look at me from this front view, as meaning the center of your hips, belt buckle, center of my pelvis, and the center of my shoulders, so just in the chest cavity here, in and around my sternum, slightly higher than my sternum, I can measure where I position my weight if I move those two centers around throughout the golf swing. And many of you are doing that. You're making the error of moving your weight incorrectly. And simply put, if you're chunking the ball, the likelihood is you have one or both of these centers too far behind the ball. So when you swing back or when you swing down, for whatever reason, you move your weight or your mass behind the ball. If you do that, you move the bottom of the swing back behind the ball and you're likely to hit the ground first. There's the chunk or the fat shot. So in order to avoid that, you want to think about keeping one or both of these centers in front of the ball, especially the lower center. Most of you will understand that you need to have your lower body weight more forward at impact than you do at setup. But also you want your upper body to be pretty close to being on top of or slightly in front of the ball in order to generate that nicely compressed golf shot that we're all looking for. So where your weight is throughout the swing, and particularly at impact, matters tremendously when it comes to controlling contact. If you struggle with this piece and you want to practice how to fix the weight, then I would just start out by putting more weight on your front foot and keeping it there. You could go as much as 70 or 80% of your weight on your forward leg, and you could swing in a way that promoted you keeping the weight forward. So if I was to keep my weight forward, I'll just move this ball slightly for this exercise, and I was to swing down, you'll see that my contact point on the mat here is always in front of the orange stick, or always in front of the ball. It's a very simple way to think about golf, but actually an extremely effective way for hundreds, if not thousands, of golfers to improve their contact immediately. I teach this every single day on the lesson tee to players who struggle with contact. So if you're chunking the ball, first thing to look at, where or how are you moving your weight? If you'd like to fix it, put all of your weight on the front foot, turn around that point, and go ahead and hit some shots. Let me hit one of those weight forward shots for you just to demonstrate. And even as I make my practice swings here by keeping my weight on the front, I can see that my club is striking the mat just after the ball, and that's what we'd want. You can use the ground, whether it's the mat or the grass on the golf course, you can use the ground as some feedback as to whether or not you're improving this skill. Pay attention to where this club is hitting the ground in your practice swings. Make sure it's after the ball. I'm doing that by keeping my weight forward. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hit one. I'm going to keep all of my weight on the front. That was definitely not chunked. That was a solid contact. Very nice ball flight, pretty straight, and good distance. So overall, I'd be really happy with that outcome. I fixed my contact there just by making sure that my weight was further forward at impact, and I took care of most of that at setup. I put the weight forward, I kept it there, and that meant that as I came down, this club was more likely to strike the ball first and the ground second. Reason number two that you would typically chunk the ball or hit the ground behind the ball is due to poor wrist angles in the downswing. Typically, this is a loss of the wrist angles in the downswing, a casting or a flipping that would result in the club head and the shaft overtaking the lead arm, so overtaking the lead arm before impact. That's going to make the radius of this swing arc too wide, too soon, So it's prematurely going to get too wide. Now the swing arc is wider than it should be. I'm going to hit the ground before the ball. And I'll make the point that I can still make that error even if I had my weight forward. So if you think you're keeping your weight forward and you're doing what I just said about controlling the location of your body weight, but you're still hitting the ground behind the ball, I could have all of my weight forward and I can still hit the ground behind the ball if I'm not controlling these wrist angles. Let me show you how you would practice that piece if you think that this is your problem. Take your golf club and an alignment stick and just place the alignment stick down the back of the golf club, artificially extending the club here. So the stick is an extension of my golf club. And as I set up now, I'm going to have this small amount of shaft lean built into the setup. I'm going to have the stick just touching the left side of my body. If I was to make the error that I just discussed, which is the early casting or flipping of the club, I'm going to get a sense of that stick striking the side of my body before I hit the ball. What I'm looking for is to keep the stick away from my body, keep some space here between the stick and my body, by moving my wrist angles in a desirable fashion, specifically keeping this lead wrist more flexed and this trail wrist more bent. That would be the motion necessary to keep the hands ahead of the club head coming down. And now you'll see that rather than the shaft overtaking the lead arm, you'll see that this lead arm has the shaft still trailing it. The shaft is still behind the lead arm when I hit the ball. That's the picture that you'll see all the best ball strikers able to create at impact. And if you're looking to create that yourself, start out using the stick drill, extend your club, make some swings where you hit the ground, but you keep the stick away from your side. They're going to be small swings to start with, but you can actually transfer into hitting balls with this exercise. And then once you've learned the sensation of how those wrists should feel in the downswing, at impact, and just into this early follow through, you'll be able to take the stick away and be able to replicate this even without the stick in place. So let me hit one with the stick in place. I'm going to keep my weight forward. I'm going to hit the ball and I'm going to keep the stick away from my side. Really nice contact. Really good compression of the ball. These are going to be small little punch shots. That one went just about 100 yards. But to begin with, this is a great place for you to start. You're going to need to go slowly. The minute you start to go quickly, you're going to revisit that old pattern of casting and you'll get yourself back into trouble. So start out slow. I've actually got a 6-iron here, but you could even start out with something as small as a 9-iron or a pitching wedge. Just keep the stick away from my body, weight on the front. Go ahead and hit one. Again, good control of the wrist angles. That one was a little bit straighter. These are going to be really nice contact, fairly straight punch shots. That's how you're going to start out. Let me show you how the position of the wrists at impact actually affects this whole chunking discussion far more than you might realize. So I've set up the hack motion wrist sensor on my trail wrist, and this is a really personal drill for me as well. This is the problem that I struggle with in my swing, losing the trail wrist bend as I come into impact. So a little bit of flipping that takes place through the ball. And that will usually lead to some mishits from a strike point of view, and also I tend to lose the shots more to the left than I want to. So I'm going to show you how I use this even in my practice to help me. So regular shot, standard 6-iron swing. Let's go ahead and hit one. Felt very solid off the club face. That's my typical pattern, a slight push, draw, ball's gone, 175, that's pretty typical of what I would expect. Now, if we take a look at the flexion extension data on the hack motion here, this is really interesting and something that I know that I struggle with. When I set up to the ball, I have a small amount of trail wrist extension. Okay, so I have a little bit of bend in my trail wrist, which would be correct. It's 13 degrees was actually on that last swing. So my normal setup, I have a small amount of trail wrist extension. That's 14, 15 degrees right there. On the last swing, it started at 13. So that would be correct. You'll see that there's a small angle between my trail arm and the shaft. Now, what I want to do, and what you need to do if you're going to hit the ball better, is come back to impact with at least that much, if not slightly more. But what you'll see from the data there on my shot is when I hit the ball, I actually had 4 degrees of flexion. So the trail wrist has gone from having this small amount of bend, extension, to having none, to being flat. That flip is just happening very, very, very slightly too soon, but it's having some adverse effects on my ability to control contact and the direction of my shots over time. And I know that under pressure on the golf course, that tends to get worse. So my contact gets a little more sketchy and my directional control gets worse. I tend to hit more shots to the left. So you can see here using the hack motion that I can really understand that my wrists need some work. Let me now go ahead and hit one with the stick drill and the hack motion just to show you how that trains this desirable trail wrist bend at impact. So nicely struck. It's going to be that low, tiny little low punch draw. This is interesting. If you take a look at the numbers now, at address, I had the same amount of extension in the trail wrist. Remember last time it was 13 degrees of extension, this was 15. So essentially the wrist is in the same place. But when I hit the ball that time, my trail wrist had 27 degrees of extension versus 4 degrees of flexion. That's an enormous 30-degree difference in the position of this hand. So I need to use this stick drill to help me train the feeling of holding on to these wrist angles for longer, so that when I don't have any training aid and I don't have any drill that I'm doing, I'm able with my real swing to delay the release of the wrists sufficiently to be able to control not only contact but also the shot direction. I think this exercise will really help you now to see how much your trail wrist needs to bend and how you can use this stick drill to help you achieve those desirable wrist angles. That should help you control your contact and remove your tendency to hit those chunked shots. Improve the location of your weight, improve your wrist angles at impact, and those fat shots should be a thing of the past. If you enjoyed the video, I hope you look at the link in the description. There are more videos that you can watch on training your wrists to improve your golf game.